Well, hola, New Orleans. Happy Cinco de Mayo. See, say that 5 times fast. To everyone, and special Dattitude Friday morning, May the 5th, 2023. Episode number 149. Here I am with my friend Jeff Duncan, as we're about set to go through, hopefully, the final, at least early draft look back on the Saints as we move on after this. And we're going to get Jeff Duncan's pick on the Kentucky Derby. So that is our show for today. Excuse me, that is the wrong graphic. There is our subject look at today again. And we're also going to talk a little bit about the NFC South and how well they did, because I think the NFC South did very well. So that's our show for today. But again, we're going to start off with the Saints. And I'm going to ask my friend how he's doing. How are you doing this morning, Jeff Duncan?
I'm doing good, man. I enjoyed Locals Thursday at Jazz Fest. And today is for a Louisville native, big weekend starting today with Kentucky Oaks. So I'm jacked.
Yeah, well, I didn't make it at the Jazz Fest again. About the 20th straight year I am missing from down. It's so hard to go down there and get there. Now you live close, so it's not as bad for you. But man, well, I mean, not super close, but close enough to where it's not a major pain in the keister for me. To drive across, and then this morning with all that weather we had, man, it's. And with kids, may I mention?
Well, but put it this way, JD. I mean, Locals Thursday is probably the most hassle-free of any of the days. So, multiply that, on Saturday and Sunday when the big crowds come. So yesterday was not bad at all. Actually went with Fletcher Mackel, our colleague.
Man, okay. How's his hair?
Well, Fletch lives near the track, so near the fairgrounds. So. Okay. It's easy to park at his house and walk over, so it reduces the hassle.
Best hair in the business, Fletcher Mackel, without question. All right, let's get to some real things going on here and talk about the Saints. And, I have a feeling that we're going to be fairly close on our overall grade, I think, but maybe not feel the same way, especially about the early rounds of the draft. I know the early rounds went not only the way that you predicted, but probably the way that had you been on the other side and maybe making picks, they probably would have been what you chose. Obviously, I've been talking about how I thought this team needed more offense. And they got it later in the draft, but I wish they would have gone that way earlier. Overall, I give them a solid grade. I thought they did well, especially in the later rounds. But just your overall opinion and overall thought process of how this team did last Thursday through Saturday.
Well, I didn't think there were really very many surprises. I thought pretty much they went by the book. I think a lot of people had the Saints mocked to take Bryan Bresee. He's the kind of guy that fills the one real glaring need that they had was a 3-technique interior defensive tackle. The 2 tackles they signed in free agency, Nathan Shepard and Jalen Saunders, are both kind of run stopper guys. They don't fit the actual skill set that is needed in the interior to rush the passer. So you knew they were going to address that somewhere. And so it made sense when the value was there to take the defensive tackle at that spot. That didn't surprise me at all. Foskey, the second round pick, also in an area that you can certainly make a case for down the road, especially with Cam Jordan being, I think he's 34 now. They lost Marcus Davenport. So, it was kind of a textbook Jeff Ireland draft. I mean, we talked about 4 prototypes. I mean, they do. I don't know how many times I have to say this, Jim, to people till they get it straight, but they're not going to veer in those early rounds off their prototype. They're just not going to do it. So people need to, when they do their mock drafts, they start thinking about it, just eliminate guys that don't fit it early in the draft. They're not going to go there. We've now got a track record here of, almost 10 years where he's not veered off of that. So I think it's pretty safe to say when you're down there looking at a running back like Kendre Miller, who they took from TCU, he fits exactly the size prototype they look for at running back. When I say exactly, I mean exactly his size. And so when everyone was targeting Tyjae Spears to go there, he's smaller, doesn't weigh as much. It's not that they don't like Tyjae Spears. It's that he doesn't fit their prototype, so he drifts down their draft board further than other teams. And I see that pattern developing year after year, and yet I still see these kind of confusing mocks.
We are going to take your comments and questions throughout this half an hour or so show. We may go 40 minutes. We're not going to go as long as we normally go today. I can tell you that. It won't be the hour-long show. So if you want to get your comments or questions in, do it as soon as you possibly can. You can do it on YouTube. You can do it on Facebook if you're watching there. On Twitter, you probably have to tweet at me, at Jim Derry Jr., and we'll have to read them on the air. But Jerry's already with us this morning saying hello, and Jerry says he thinks the Saints did well, got the needs that we needed. I don't disagree with that per se, but I think you're spot on in what you said. And, last week we talked about it. The Saints weren't going to go get a Hendon Hooker. I mean, over and over and over and over, and I keep hearing Hendon Hooker. And then you talk about Tajay Spears. And while I think that would have been a great pick, that wasn't what the Saints went for a certain prototype. That's exactly what they did. The same thing with picking Isaiah Foskey, and people were upset they didn't go get BJ Ojolari and from LSU. It has nothing to do with the fact that they go to LSU or they go to Tulane. There's a certain player that fits a mold, and the Saints go after these players year after year after year. It shouldn't be a surprise by now. I don't think any of us should be surprised. So as far as the players that they picked, I have no problem with the players they picked. And like you said, if they don't fit that mold, they're not going to take them, especially early. Maybe later on in a draft they may, but not in the first, half of the draft.
Yeah, and I would say this. I mean, this was not a great draft in general, like for the entire league. It's not a great draft. And I felt like the Saints draft reflected that. I don't think any of these players, you never know how they develop, but just in general, looking at the class, I don't think this is going to be a class of superstar. I think it's a bunch of role players, guys that will be a part of this team for, the next 5-6 years. They'll be a part of the core. But I don't see, all pro type players on this class. And that's fine, because that's the way some drafts are. You just need to get quality, productive players and fill some certain roles on your team. And I feel like this class is one of those classes where you're going to do that, because they've already kind of got the star power in their other positions. These were more, hey, we need an aspect. We need an interior pass rushing threat. That's what Bryan Bresee brings to the team. So they were looking for, I think, traits as much as anything else with this draft class. Nick Saldivari, the interior offensive lineman, fills a need. They needed somebody, as a developmental prospect down the road to potentially replace Andres Pete or Cesar Ruiz, neither of whom is guaranteed to be on the roster beyond next season. So a lot of these guys, I think, are projection picks to be a part of this team in 2024 going forward. I'm not sure how much impact any of them are going to have this year beyond maybe their first pick.
I'm a huge fan of the Saldivari pick. You talk about what the Saints have at guard right now. Andres Pete, for all the Saints fans' negativity towards him, and including this show's host throughout the years, Andres Pete has filled what he was supposed to do when he came in here in the first round, and has played like a first rounder for the most part. His problem is he can't stay on the field all the time. So you can't expect him to be on the field all year. When he plays just fine. In fact, I think he plays very well. So I think Saldivari being able to come in here and being a solid backup from the start, which I think is what he's going to be. But you look at his size is very similar to what Andres Pete's size is.
Yeah, I mean, again, he fits the prototype. I mean, really, he's carbon copy of what they look for in those kind of offensive linemen. He's a smart guy, tough guy. He fits the mode. I'm talking to Jeff Ireland later today. We'll have a little tease for people out there. We're going to have a Q&A with Jeff Ireland on this draft class for this weekend on NOLA.com and in the Times-Picayune, where we'll get him to break down what exactly he looked for in each of these prospects. He's always very informative. Obviously, he's the guy running the draft. But you can see that Saldivari fits not only the mode they look for, but also I think, fills a need, because what I said earlier, contractually, they didn't pick up Cesar Ruiz's fifth-year option on his contract. So he's kind of playing for his future this year. The Saints like to do that. Mickey Loomis sometimes likes to dangle the carrot. We're not gonna re-up you, but if you prove it this year, we'll give you a long-term deal. They did that with Marcus Davenport, and of course he didn't deliver, so he's gone elsewhere. But they from year to year they'll do that, I think, as incentive.
I think we're getting close to the point where, look, we talked about this before. Cesar Ruiz was one of those picks where I think the Saints, and I like to use this term because I think it fits perfectly, but they kind of got snaked. I think they had someone else in mind when they were supposed to pick there. They couldn't trade down. They were kind of stuck. You're on the clock. You got 8 minutes to make a decision, and Cesar Ruiz was the best player on their board at that spot, and they just kind of were stuck taking him. And he's been serviceable. He's been, he's helped when McCoy's been injured. He can move to center, and it helps to have some flexibility there. But I'm not sure that Cesar Ruiz is going to be on this team beyond the season. We'll see. But I think Saldiveri that was one of my favorite picks there. It really was. I thought they did an excellent job being able to move up, and that's what they did. By the way, they moved up to get Saldiveri again because it's hard to find a 6'6" guard who kind of fits your mold and can jump right in, and I think can play right away. I do want to talk about Bresee in a minute, and really Foskey for that matter. But I want to talk a little bit about Jay Kaner and Kendre Miller. And to me, Miller is a guy who can step in right away, and will have to, Jeff, because we don't know what's going to happen with Alvin Kamara. He's getting to that age of running backs to where it's kind of weird. You don't know even if he's out 6 or 8 games and comes back, how effective is he going to be? How much longer is he going to be able to play at the Alvin Kamara kind of level? I'm interested to get your thoughts on Kendre Miller because his size is almost exactly the same. And if you look at him, this is almost exactly where the Saints got Alvin Kamara, 6 years ago now.
Well, I can tell you this, just, making some calls during the week this week and talking to people around the organization, in the organization, that's the guy they're high on. They're very high on Kendre Miller. They really believe they've got a big steal in him. It's a guy that I don't think a lot of people know a lot about.
Right.
He came from a small high school in East Texas, right near the Louisiana border. I think his high school had 200 students total. So he was playing at a lower level, got overlooked as a recruit, and then, got to TCU and was behind a couple of good backs and really just had a huge breakout year. And then, declared for the NFL draft. So he's kind of an underutilized guy. He doesn't have a lot of tread on the tire, and I think they like that. And like we said, he's versatile. He blocks well. That's another big thing with the Saints. You're going to have your back on the field. He's got to be able to pass protect. So that was something that I think they valued. And you're right. He's going to have a role early for sure with Jamal Williams, but there's no pressure on him right now because they've got Williams to kind of carry the load if Alvin Kamara's sideline for any lengthy period of time. So it made all the perfect sense in the world. I didn't know a whole lot about him, but the more I've heard, the more I've researched him, the more I like the pick.
I don't think hardly any of us really did. That wasn't really of the running backs that we had on our board. And I was looking at what we had on our, pre-draft board and potentials at running back. He wasn't on my top 7. But the more I look into him, the more he could be a lot like Alvin Kamara, and he certainly is that size. I don't know if he quite has the speed, but we'll find out. I'm not sure that Alvin Kamara is as fast as everyone is. He has shifties.
Alvin Kamara is not that fast.
Yeah, exactly.
He's never been like a speed back. That's something I think misleading. What
100%
very
agree.
Similar is they both have very good balance and vision, and I think that's what you need in a runner.
Johnny chat. We're going to get to the NFC South in just a minute, Johnny, but we'll go ahead and say this. Johnny says the Panthers got Jonathan Mingo, best wide receiver in the draft. Ole Miss product. I think that Jonathan Mingo was also a part of a Lane Kiffin system that benefited him very well, let's just say. So we'll see how he translates going further. So I don't necessarily – I think he's a good wide receiver. But that being said, I think the Panthers are going to be a force to be reckoned with here. Again, I want to go back to some of the things the Saints did. But while we're talking about it, Dunc, I thought the Panthers and Falcons both had outstanding drafts, and especially the Panthers. I think they can be forces right away And when we talk odds, because sometimes we do talk odds on this show. I'm the sports betting writer for the Times-Picayune. And you look at the Panthers being at like plus 280, I think, to win the division. That could be the value. Saints fans might not want to hear this, but I think they could be the value in steel, because I think they have an excellent chance to get in there, Dunc, and win this division. They're going to be up there, right up there with the Saints.
Yeah, I think Bryce Young is one of the few young quarterbacks that can step into the league and have a very quick, almost seamless transition. There's very few guys I would say that about, but coming out of that Alabama system, he's played at a very high level for a long time. He's been in the biggest games there is. I mean, he is a unique prospect, and all you hear about him is his ability to, read, diagnose, be a field general on the field. I mean, he definitely raises them to another level. They haven't had a quarterback since Cam Newton.
Agreed.
This is finally, I think they filled that void, and that's why they made the trade they did. So I agree with you. Now, where they're lacking, and I'm sure they know this in their roster building, is they had to, trade away DJ Moore. They're lacking some of the perimeter talent that you need in this league to go far, but all the building blocks now are in place. That defense is loaded with like first-round draft.
Absolutely.
Yeah, they're good. I mean, we've seen that here in New Orleans when they played Carolina. Saints have struggled to move the ball against Carolina, and they fixed, I think, a lot of their problems on the offensive line. Now, I think the next year or two, you'll see them start to get a receiver here, and get a tight. I like their tight end actually, but get another running back to replace McCaffrey. That'll be a part of this process. But I agree. I think Atlanta did well. Bijan Robinson, you add him into the mix.
Absolutely.
With those skill position players, I mean, I really believe it's kind of a three-team race. I think Tampa might be the fourth team in this division. And I think the Saints, if you looked at it, say, once they signed Derek Carr, everybody said they're clearly head and shoulders above everyone else. I don't think that gap is nearly as wide as it was maybe a couple months ago. I
couldn't agree more. And I think Tampa Bay is going to be terrible. I really do. If they prove me wrong, then prove me wrong. But I think that I just don't think they're very well coached anyway. So, I mean, they should have run away with this division last year, and they didn't. I mean, the Saints don't make some big mistakes in that game at Tampa on a Monday night. I think that division's completely different. I think the Saints win the division if they don't make the big mistakes that they made there. I think they play the end of the season completely different, obviously, if they win that game. And they were that close to beating Tampa Bay last year, and honestly had no business beating Tampa Bay last year. So we'll see how that goes. But I still think the Saints are the class of the division right now. And they're, I think, plus 120, which means they're basically almost even money to win the division. That's where they are right now. I want to go back to Bresee, Dunc, and I think it's an interesting pick. Again, this is a pick that I wasn't necessarily fond of at the time, and really still not. I get that that's where people thought that's their biggest need, and maybe it is their biggest need going into the draft. However, I still think defensive tackle is just easier to get, easier to fill in. But that being said, you get a chance to get a 6'5", 305 guy that was the number one recruit in the nation coming out of high school. If this dude stays healthy, which he hasn't been able to in college, by the way, but if he can stay healthy, you say there's no potential All-Pro. I think that this is a potential All-Pro kind of pick. Again, if he can stay healthy, he could be a force in the middle.
Yeah, he's 6'5", 305. He fits the prototype. Big, like you said, he was a massive recruit, one of these can't miss kind of guys that came in there and then lived up to the expectations, which a lot of times guys don't. There's a little bit of a pressure that comes with those top recruits, and he lived up to that. So I think that speaks a lot for him. I also think the Saints feel like that they kind of got a little bit of a steal because of his injury history.
Yeah,
it might have dropped him down a little further. So they might have gotten, a player that could have been maybe a top 10 pick on talent that because of his, kind of checkered last couple of years. And I'll be interested to talk to Jeff Ireland about his injury history. Certainly the Saints, they, like every team, go over that with a fine-tooth comb. So I think they obviously felt good about it and aren't as worried about it as, say, maybe fans are who have had to suffer through with a lot of injury, bad luck the last few years.
I got to say, as far as Isaiah Foskey goes, anyone who's watched me at all the past week or so, I know you're going to feel completely different about this, and it's okay. That's why I like to have you on the show, because Ashley, you obviously know more of the interior workings of the team. And again, Isaiah Foskey fits this mold. But I just thought at pick number 2, the second round pick for this team, I get you're gonna need a defensive end, but I thought this was more served to be like the first round pick for the 2024 draft and not the second round pick in this year. I just thought they needed offensive help. I would have much rather seen him go get either a wide receiver, or Darnell Washington was available. Maybe he doesn't fit the Saints mold. I know Johnson is in the fold now. I just thought they needed offensive help there, and Isaiah Foskey could turn out to be a great player for the next 6, 8, who knows, 10 years. But I didn't understand that pick at all.
Yeah, that's one of the ones I think they looked at and just said, this is the value on our board. We're going to stick with it. I think Dennis Allen even told us at the draft, it might have been the second pick where they were maybe trying to trade down.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what he said. And that would indicate that they had a number of players graded similarly to Foskey. They were fine taking him, but if they could trade down and get another player with similar value at either him or another position, then they could have picked up another asset. So I agree with you. I think it was one of those ones that, like, maybe the board didn't fall the way they wanted. I thought they might go offensive line there, because there are a lot of graded players that I felt like suited the Saints' needs at that position. But I also understand Foskey. I mean, they just believe in these big men. I think I tweeted out during the draft and after the draft. I mean, the last 3 or 4 years, the first, second, third round picks, I think about 60-70% of them have been either offensive or defensive linemen. They believe there's not that many big men with athleticism needed at the NFL level, and so it makes it a premium position, both offensive and defensive line, to take. So you got to take them early, for better or worse. That's their flop.
Well, and Jim Derry here with Jeff Duncan on this Friday morning, as we are often. Dunc, this might be the last time Dunc's on the show for a little while as we go into our summer mode coming up here. We will still have live Dattitudes every Friday throughout the summer, except for the couple weeks that I take vacation here and there. As we start gearing up, it won't be long. I mean, we're only 2 months away from July, so it won't be long before we start gearing up for the 2024 season, although we will take some little breaks here and there. Look, I agree with what you just said, and maybe it is because they had someone else in mind there, and it just didn't happen where things happen throughout a draft. One pick, and Johnny Chats asked, we talked about Kendre Miller already, but he asked about Jake Haener, and I think, to me, this might be the most interesting pick of this draft. I talked early on about how you cannot waste isn't the right word. You cannot spend a top 40 pick on a guy like Hendon Hooker. You don't have the luxury. This team has more needs there, and obviously they thought their needs were at defense. They did as well as they did on defense as far as overall ranking last year. There was certainly they did have issues rushing the passer, so we can understand why they would go in that direction. So you couldn't spend a early pick on a quarterback. But I think to get a guy like Jake Haener in the 4th round, someone that Zach Ewing and I have been talking about for quite a while, man, does he fit into this team? You know, if something happens to Derek Carr, not this year, because obviously Jameis Winston is in the fold and is going to be the backup quarterback. But I think Jake Haener is the kind of guy that could sponge off of Derek Carr and not only be a great backup, but could end up being a starter for this team at some point long term. He wears number 9 and he looks like number 9.
Well, yeah, that surprised me a little bit just because he doesn't really fit their prototype. I mean, it really interested.
Well, as far as size wise, he looks like number 9 from before.
Right. But there's only one number 9. You know,
that's right. Exactly.
Yeah, there's only one Drew Brees. I wouldn't put that on him, but I understand why he tries to play like him because of the same size. I'm interested to talk to Jeff about, I guess they felt comfortable taking him where they did because of the size prototype. But I think what the Saints have learned here learn the hard way the last couple of years is what they really need at the quarterback position is a field general. I mean, that's the way their offense runs. They put a lot on the plate of the quarterback at the line of scrimmage to ask them to get in and out of plays. It's been an issue the last couple of years. I think they feel much better about having Derek Carr now. That's something I keep hearing from their coaches is they're really excited about just his ability to avoid negative plays, to avoid bad plays. So I think that Drew Brees, one of his great strengths among many was his ability to get the Saints into the right play after reading the line of scrimmage and the defense. So I think this is the kind of guy that can operate that system. Not going to blow you away with his, physical traits or anything. He's obviously a very good athlete, but he knows how to run an offense. And I think that's what the Saints really value at the quarterback position. So it surprised me a little bit that they took him as high as they did, but I know he's the kind of guy. And I know this, talking this week, they're very excited about him. I mean, the guys they talked about the most when I talked to Saints sources this week were Kendre Miller and Jake Haener.
I can tell you this from looking at what I saw. I don't know that there's a player of the 7 players the Saints drafted more excited to be a New Orleans Saint than Jake Haener. I can say that because he's obviously looked up to Drew Brees his entire life. He's coming in. He played at Fresno. Derek Carr played at Fresno. And so he gets to come in here and just work with Derek Carr. I think he's just thrilled about that as well.
Well, here's the thing. Like, I haven't talked to Jeff yet. I'm going to talk to him later today. But someone told me in the building that talked to him this week that he said he got 7 of his top 75 guys on the board in this
really
round. So that's what I try to tell people all the time.
That's amazing.
The Saints board is different from the rest of the league,
yeah.
and it's not uncommon. I mean, other teams have different top 100, but in the Saints' mind, their 7 draft picks were among their 75 top prospects in the whole draft. So that what works for them and their system and their prototypes might not be for everybody else, but for the Saints, they feel like they got 7 really good players.
And I think that all 7 of these teams, I mean, obviously the top 3 are going to make the team. Saldivari is going to make the team. Haener is going to probably be on the practice squad. But I think all 7 of these guys are going to make this team. I don't think any of them are going to get cut. I mean, you talk about Jordan Howden could be a steal in the 5th round as a safety. I mean, it's something this team does need, especially depth-wise. And A.T. Perry, I thought, was an excellent pick. I mean, with the size that he has, Dunc, at 6'3", and he has speed, and I think he could come in here. I mean, Marcus Colston was a 7th-round pick. I mean, this could be that same kind of thing almost, I think.
Oh, yeah. Look, I think that guy, a lot of people had projected as like a 3rd, 4th-round pick. So
yeah,
that felt like a steal for the Saints, and they certainly targeted him. He's a little limited in some ways, but I can see why they went for a younger receiver. I mean, they need, who knows what happens with Mike Thomas this year. He's basically on a 1-year deal. So even if, say, he does have a breakout year, maybe he has a big rebound season, it's no guarantee he's going to come back here. I mean, he could
that is exactly
cash in free agency. So it makes sense to try and get a guy with some size to add that to the receiving core, because Rashid Shaheed and Chris Olave are clearly a part of the future core receiver, but both of those are undersized guys.
Yeah, and barring free agents pickups or something going on in the near future that's weird, I think we'll see in 2024 that wide receiver will be high on their 2024 draft board, I think, as we go into next year. All right, I'm going to steal a graphic from our Bayou Bet show, because before we get your Kentucky Derby picks, I want to get our Ask Your Grade. And we had a poll this week on bet.NOLA.com grading the Saints draft. It was overwhelming. The Saints draft, it was the 70.2% of the 500 or so. There were more than 500 people who responded, but of the 500 plus, 70.2% gives it a B, which saying they filled the needs and didn't reach, which is kind of what I think almost every year. And by the way, I did a post earlier this week, Dunc, on the media experts, or so quote unquote experts and outlets,
right,
and who graded the draft. I think Mel Kiper has given the Saints a B- like every year for like the last 6 years. You could just plug B in with this draft. They never do anything that's like overwhelming, like, wow, they got this guy. Hardly ever can you say that. But at the same time, you hardly ever say, well, that draft sucked. I mean, so they're pretty much stuck in the B range. That's actually what I'd give them. I'd give them a B-. I'm with Mel Kiper. I hate agreeing with Mel Kiper, because it's hard to believe someone actually has a job that's all you do for 52 weeks out of the year. But I think it's nothing splashy, but they filled their needs and probably did exactly what they wanted to do.
Yeah, look, I would agree wholeheartedly. I think that's exactly where I would fall. I don't think they came into this draft thinking they were going to get an A draft. I don't think it was a great draft. Like I said, I don't feel like
it wasn't like last year.
Yeah, well, the top 15 or so in this draft were clearly separate from the rest of the draft, and the Saints were going to be able to get into that group. So you take a guy like Bresee, who has the potential to be there, and so you roll the dice on that, and hopefully he stays healthy, and then you feel like maybe you got a guy that could be the guy down the road. So I think it filled the exact biggest need they had on the roster, and that was interior pass rush. I've written about this a bunch. Everyone looks at that number last year and says, "Oh, the Saints had 48 sacks. They're pretty good at rushing the passer." Really, all their advanced analytics on pass rushing, pressures, and they're way down near the bottom of the league. And I think they knew that. It was played out with the first 2 picks this year. So I feel like this was more about a draft of filling some key roles that they felt like were missing on the roster after they got through free agency.
And Dunc, especially in the latter half of the season. I think their biggest problem is they were making the push and they were starting to play better. That Philadelphia game, to me, sticks out because if you just take that Philadelphia game, they proved that they can play with the best teams in the NFL. The problem was they couldn't find any consistency whatsoever, especially from the quarterback position. I'm not going to go rail on Andy Dalton again, but they just couldn't find any consistency there. And to me, Alvin Kamara was a step behind his normal self last year. I thought the offensive line didn't play well at all when they were together. They had injury woes throughout the season. But, man, if you can shore up and start to get consistency, I think this team, especially with this schedule, this might be the easiest schedule this team has had in over a decade.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. I mean, they don't play really hardly any elite quarterbacks in a game.
None.
A game that's defined by the quarterback position. I've never seen anything like it.
It's ridiculous.
So, yeah, with the Saints, really the strength of this team is their secondary and their pass defense. I can see why the Saints felt like, hey, let's play into our strength there. Let's make our defense better. And, for one more year, we can rely on this defense to keep us in games. And now you got Derek Carr. You just look back on some of the games the Saints lost last year, like at Arizona. I mean, unforgivable loss. You lose that game because of turnovers you made and gave them that game kind of. Same thing happened early at Tampa against Tampa in the Dome. It was a 3-3 game. Yep. Jameis Winston imploded in the fourth quarter. He gave that game away.
Well, it started with Ingram's fumble at the 10-yard line.
Yeah. So, and if you listen to Dennis Allen, read between the lines what he says, he keeps talking about finishing games. Those are the games he's talking about. The ones where they were in it or had the lead, and then they kind of gave it away. And they gave a lot of it away because of the quarterback positions. So, and then the other game I think of that sticks out to me is that Bengals game where they were kind of winning most of the game, and then
Joe
Burrow made some plays late. And the Saints had no ability to finish that off at the quarterback position.
Or find Jamar Chase.
Yeah, I feel like they feel like Derek Carr is going to be able to handle that. I feel like what happened last year is when they got those leads, they were so concerned about the quarterback that they didn't try to win the game with the quarterback. Instead, they tried to tread water, let's not mess up, and the other team beat them. I think they'll be more confident now in finishing a game with Derek Carr than they were with Dalton.
I couldn't agree more. And you talk about the Arizona game, which was early in the season on a Thursday night. And I just think about, again, I'm not railing on them. Anybody could have made this play, but you're driving down to take a lead on the road. I think that would have kind of demoralized the Cardinals a little bit. And you drive all the way down the field and Andy Dalton throws an interception in the end zone. And I mean, you can't. One thing I think that you're going to see from Derek Carr is I'll be surprised if there is a red zone interception this year. I mean, I know that's tough to say throughout the course of a 17-game season, but those are the kind of mistakes he's not going to make. That's the difference, I think, between a guy like Derek Carr and a guy like Andy Dalton. A lot of people say they're the same quarterback. You're insane if you think that, by the way. But the best quarterbacks the Saints will face this year, and we talked about it, Ryan Tannehill, Trevor Lawrence, and probably you can throw Bryce Young, and he's a rookie, in there. So those are the best quarterbacks the Saints are going to face all year long. Ryan Tannehill is on the list.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think Trevor Lawrence is probably, I would say, the way he ascended last year a little bit, you have to think he's going to make another step. But for the most part, they avoid the Mahomeses and the Justin Herberts of the league, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson. I mean, Lamar Jackson
Hurts.
He basically beat the Saints last year by himself in that game in the Dome.
Yep.
He was so good. So, I think the schedule is user-friendly. And you don't have to be any super team to win the NFC South this year. I think it's gonna be another one of those years where the team that wins the division might be like 9-8 or something. I don't see any super teams in there.
This is why I think that if you look at Philadelphia last year, and I'm not taking anything away from them, they made it to the Super Bowl. They got the luckiest draw throughout the entire season, and then in the playoffs, everything happened right for them as well, including San Francisco being down to their fourth string quarterback at the end. But the Saints could be in a similar situation to what the Eagles were in last year, because the Eagles had the easiest schedule in the NFL last year, them and the Cowboys, and they both made it well into the Giants. Don't think the Giants. I mean, one of the reasons why I was high on the Giants last year and high on the Giants over win total is because the Giants had one of the easiest schedules in the NFL. The NFC East had basically the same kind of schedule that the NFC South has this year. So I don't know if I agree that 9-8 is going to win this division. I actually think that one of these teams is going to have 11 wins, 10 or 11 wins, because of the schedules that they have. So I think you might see an 11 or 10 win, and then the second place might be 10 or 9. But again, because of what, so I think that overs in the NFC South getting zero respect whatsoever. I think you might be able to book some overs and win some money that way because of who they play. And a lot of people, when they go to the window and they want to say, just give me the under on the Carolina Panthers, they're not thinking about who they play. They're just thinking, okay, well, the Panthers suck, or the Saints, they might go 9-8 and win the division. They're on automatic under. Well, we all thought they were over last year. I guarantee you more people are going to bet the under 9.5 because they think that's ridiculously high than they're going to bet the over going into the season.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. I didn't think about it that way, but you're right. The schedule, the schedule rotation plays into that.
Correct.
You get matched up with the division that doesn't have a lot of great quarterback play, and it plays out. I know the Vegas bookmakers, they know that. That's how they set those
100%.
lines. And I'll tell you the other thing that, everyone's just lauding the Eagles right now, and I think they could be a team that could regress.
100%.
They snuck up on the league a little bit last year. I think that offense was a little unique, and I guarantee you everyone in the NFC East certainly has studied that offense this offseason. Not going to be as easy to move the ball with that running game, that short yardage, rugby move, like all that stuff is going to be deciphered. And they'll have counters for that in this offseason. And then Nick Sirianni and his staff are going to have to adjust. We'll see how good they are because –
And he lost his OC.
Yeah, I know. That's what I'm saying. And the DC. So, I think they could regress. And everyone's just immediately looking at their draft and thinking they're going to be elite. I'm not sure I've fallen in line. Matter of fact, if I were betting on who's going to win the NFC, I would pick either Dallas or San Francisco over Philadelphia. Just because
I 100% agree.
Because of the value,
Well, San Francisco is actually already kind of, I think they're ahead.
Favored.
Yeah, they're favored. So I actually would look to Dallas because I agree with you. I think Dallas is going to take a step forward. I know you're a little homerish on Mike McCarthy. So you've always been a fan of Mike McCarthy. I'm just saying. I'm not knocking him.
Games every year.
I'm not like everybody else. I'm not knocking him because he does win. And he actually ran a good offense when he was here. He turned Aaron Brooks into an NFL quarterback. That's not easy to do. So I'm not bashing him. I'm just saying that you're a little higher on Mike McCarthy than most people.
I know. You got to think for yourself, people. Don't be a sheep.
I actually think that being said,
the internet and think Twitter knows what they're talking about. That's what happened with Mike McCarthy. Mike McCarthy's a bigger, older white guy. That's the easiest person to beat up on right now in America. Someone like Mike McCarthy.
He looks like in 10 or 15 years, he's going to look exactly like Andy Reid, I think. Except I don't want to compare Mike McCarthy to Andy Reid. Nothing against Mike McCarthy, because again, I think he's a solid NFL coach, but he's not Andy Reid. But that's a whole nother story. All right. Well, we're going to talk more about that when we get closer to the season and we start making preseason picks. But I'm just giving you a little preview. I think, but I'm not going to include Tampa Bay in the mix because I think they're going to be awful. But I think the other three teams are all going to be better than people expect a lot because of the schedule. We're going to get into the schedule thing again later on as we get closer to the season. So Dunc and I both give the Saints a B, which means we're going to move on and close out this show with one of my favorite little segments of throughout the entire course of the year is when Dunc and I talk about the Kentucky Derby. And for those of you that don't know anything about Jeff Duncan, he's from Louisville, so he's obviously got to be a horse racing aficionado. He grew up like we grew up with Jazz Fest and Mardi Gras. He grew up with the Kentucky Derby. It was just part of his life growing up, his childhood. So what is it about the Kentucky Derby that is so special to you?
Well, it's a lot like Mardi Gras and Jazz Fest, and it's a community event. And, it's a huge event in Louisville. It's the marquee week of the year for the economy up there. And, the thing I like about it is it's more than just and it's really kind of my philosophy of covering sports. Like I like things that go beyond just the game itself, beyond the X's and O's. You go to the Kentucky Derby, I mean, it's like a fashion show. There's celebrities. It's a melting pot of humanity. It's the most unbelievable event. You have the richest people in the world, billionaire horse owners, coming in from Saudi Arabia and Europe, in America. Then you have all these A-list celebrities, movie stars, actresses, Tom Brady. And then you have the degenerate horse players. You have the college kids out in the infield, doing shots and diving around in mud puddle. I mean, it's just they're all right there in one spot. There's really nothing else I can think of like that. I mean, the Super Bowl isn't like that. You don't have that same mix of people. So it's just a unique people watching kind of mecca. When you go to that event, I mean, by the end of the day, you're worn out because it's a long day, but you're also just worn out because it's sensory overload. You're looking at people's outfits, everybody's dressed to the nines. It's just an amazing spectacle, and it's unique. I think there's 160,000 people there. I mean, I can't think of any other event I've been to with that many people either. So it's and everyone that went up, it was fun for me when the Bensons had their run there a couple of years back.
Yeah.
Because all my friends in the local media here who've heard me talk about it, they got to experience it. And they'd never seen anything like it before. And when they got up there, it blew them away. So it kind of validated what I've been trying to tell people.
Let's transplant ourselves back to like 1985, 1986. Were you one of those drinking and jumping around in the mud?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we figured out a way to sneak in. It's like everybody – you figure out a way to sneak in your alcohol, right?
Right.
A buddy of mine ingeniously figured out a way to we sneak in these little mini kegs and bottles. He got into a wheelchair and we put a compartment up under the seat.
Wow.
That you couldn't see, and we had it boxed off. And of course, no one was going to check his wheelchair.
Not then anyway. They would today.
Right. But he was perfectly healthy. It was just all a ruse, and we were able to sneak in for years doing that tactic. And you used to be able to get into the infield when you were in college. Back in my college days, it cost you $30 to get in.
Wow!
And that for a college kid, that was perfect. And you could sneak in your alcohol, and you could never even see the horses. I mean, it was just to see if.
But you didn't care.
It's just like being at Jazz Fest. It's the same thing. You're in the infield, and but you could. There's so many people, you can't really see the horses. You have to watch the big screens,
It's like being across the street on St. Charles on Mardi Gras Day. You don't necessarily have to be on the neutral ground. You can see whatever you want to see or don't want to see from the other side of St. Charles. You don't have to be there.
Yeah, and it's just like great. You go out at night and every restaurant's hopping. Everybody's dressed up. Everybody, there's celebrities. You might run into celebrity sighting, and everyone's talking about the races, and people have racing forums at the dinner table. It's just a fun week. It's not just that race on Saturday. I mean, there's parades and parties leading up to it, big A-list celebrity type parties. It's a social scene more than it is a sporting event.
I hate to be cliche, but I've never had a mint julep before. I hate when people say New Orleans Bourbon Street's got to be great, blah blah blah. So I hate to be cliche here, but are the mint juleps everything they're cracked up to be, or is that just kind of a symbol of the whole thing that Louisvillians, I don't know what you call yourselves, just kind of shudder at?
Well, if you come over to my house tomorrow, I'll make you one because I'll have plenty of them.
Oh man,
served up tomorrow. Yeah, that's what I partake in mint juleps. I get the tradition going, but yeah, of course, my goal in life, JD, is to have I never really had a big score on the Derby. I mean, I've had, some winning bets and won some money, but I've never had one of those like life-changing scores. And I think if I ever had one, I would hopefully be at the track because they sell $1,000 mint julep. And I think the only people that ever buy that thing are the ones that hit a big score and you're playing with house money and you're like, you know what, and it's like, ice. The ice is made from water that's been imported from like Antarctica, and like it's the highest level bourbon, and you get a Tiffany silver, mint julep glass or mug. It's all high end stuff, but you'd never spend $1,000 unless you just had money to throw away.
Nothing that I would ever probably have in my life, even if I had a big score. I mean, I'm not a cheapskate by any means whatsoever. But I think even if I hit the big score, I don't think I'd see me buying myself $1,000 mint julep.
That's probably the only way I would do it, though, is if something like that happened. But it does give you the one, and I know we're going to talk race, but the thing that's unique about the Derby, and we had our, little tease here. We had our handicappers do our Derby column that we do every year. And I'm telling you, if you're interested in learning about the Derby or you're thinking about betting it, read that column. It's on NOLA.com right now. We have some of the top thoroughbred racing handicappers in the country here. It's amazing how many really elite handicappers. I'm talking about guys that go to these national handicapping contests and win it, and win like $1 million. They're here, and some of them are handicapping the Derby for us every year. So these guys know what they're talking about. But what's unique in the Derby is you have 3-year-old horses. Horses don't start running till they're 2. In the fall is when they really start their racing careers, and they're meeting kind of for the first time. And so there's so many uncertainties in this. Most of the horses, it's almost like an NCAA tournament, if you will, like the men's NCAA tournament. You have a Final Four. You have a prep race in LA, a prep race in Miami, a prep race here in New Orleans, Louisiana Derby, of course, in Arkansas, the Wood Memorial in New York. And these horses, a lot of them have never run against each other because they're coming from different parts of the country, different circuits, and they get in this one field. It's hard to tell who's the best. You think you know, but you really don't until they run against each other. They're going 1.25 miles. They've never gone that far yet because they're developing young horses. And then how are they going to react to that environment with 150,000 people? It's a big field. There's never been
to the Belmont.
Right. Well, there's 20 horses in the field. So it's completely unique. And that's why you end up, as I put in the column this week, we've had since 2005, we've had 4 50-1 shots or higher win this race,
including an 80-1 last year.
Yeah, 81-1 last year. So it's a unique chance to make a big score. If you were to hit the trifecta or even the exacta last year, you could win a few $1,000s for a very minimal investment. So I think that's what attracts people to this race.
All right. Speaking of that, again, another graphic I'm going to steal from Zach because I am frankly did not have the time, or you could just say I was too lazy. That's fine. To show up. These are the top horses. These aren't all of them. There are too many to list on this list. But here, this was as of yesterday. This was your list. The top 8 horses in the race. Forte is the favorite at 3-1. I'm thinking that he still is, but I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah, he is.
Okay. And so my guess is by race time, that'll probably be closer to 2-1. But that being said, Dunc, is the horse that you like on this list?
Yeah, I think, and I wrote in my analysis, I think those top 4 on that list, one of those top 4 is going to win this race. I don't think anyone outside of that top 4.
What about Mage?
No.
Billy the Marlin loves Mage.
Who does?
Billy the Marlin. He was holding up signs. I'm being completely funny when I'm taking advice from a Major League Baseball mascot. I'm just saying.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think Forte, there's a lot of rumors and speculation going around the last 24 hours that he may have to scratch. I don't believe it's true, but that's that obviously be a big development. Forte and Tapit Trice are both trained by Todd Pletcher, one of the elite trainers in the sport.
Okay.
Angel of Empire, of course, ran here and won the Risen Star Stakes, and then ended up going up to Oaklawn to win the Arkansas Derby. He is who I picked on top to win, but the horse that I'm most intrigued by is Derma Sotogake, the Japanese horse.
Yep.
That's 10-1. Those are juicy odds. I think it might get bet down. That horse might get bet down to maybe 8-1, but still that's a good price. The key for that horse being in the number 17 hole is there's a long run to the first turn at Churchill Downs. That horse is going to have to get position by the time they make that first turn. He's got to use his speed out of the gate. He's got to break well and get positioned by his jockey, I think, to doesn't necessarily have to get the lead, but has to be up near the lead to avoid traffic. And that's what makes the race so interesting is if something happens out of the gate, you get a bad break, somebody comes over on you. I mean, you could be wiped out your chances right away. But he has got speed. He won the UAE Derby on the lead. And what's really interesting, Jim, is the progression and development of the Japanese horse racing industry. I mean, they've really gotten into thoroughbred racing over there. It's amazing. They're younger people. Like, we're all here. Most of the younger demographic is into sports betting, and they certainly are in Japan, but they're really younger 20-somethings into horse racing in Japan. It's very popular over there, something that the U.S. horse racing industry has not been able to kind of capture. It's mostly an older demographic, but they have really invested in thoroughbred racing. And this horse has got a chance to be the first Japanese horse to win the Kentucky Derby. They've won some Breeders' Cup races this past year. They're on the come, as they say. They're the Japanese horses. I think more and more we're going to see them in the Derby with real chances to win.
Here's why Derma Sotogake is not going to win the Kentucky Derby, because on the Bayou Bet show yesterday, I know nothing. Well, I can't say nothing. I don't know a whole ton about horse racing. I know some about horse racing. My grandfather was super into it. Used to take me to the track. I grew up at the fairgrounds, and then just stopped going when I was old enough to go by myself. But I picked Derma Sotogake yesterday to win the Derby, so that horse has no shot because I picked him. I'm just saying.
Well, I think he got a big shot. And if you look at our handicappers, I mean, a lot of them had him picked either first or second. Tim Rice picked Derma to win. And I respect Tim Rice a lot. So I don't think it would be – put it this way. There's a third graph is a horse racing, analytics type of handicapping service. And they break down all the races. They take into account ground loss, if you've raced wide, all these factors, and they put into their computer formulas. And going into this race, Derma Sotogake's UAE Derby victory was the fastest race, really by far, of anybody else that's come into this race. So for the horse racing, like hardcore analytics people, he would not be a surprise at all if he won. Well,
by the way, for the first time ever, at least in Louisiana, I believe, our partners at bet.NOLA.com, Caesars Sportsbook, you can download Caesars Racebook, I believe, nice. And you can bet the Kentucky Derby on your phone. So you don't even have to go to OTB or go to the fairgrounds or any of that. You actually can bet it on your phone. And I think they're offering a deal right now. Don't hold me to it, but I'm pretty sure I saw this, that if you make a deposit, that they will offer you a bet of 100% of whatever your deposit is, up to like $250. So check that out. Caesars Racebook, not Caesars Sportsbook, Caesars Racebook app, if you want to put something down on the Kentucky Derby. I am actually going to. One thing that's weird about horse racing, before we go off the air, that people might not know, Dunc, your casual bettor who hasn't bet horse racing but has bet other sports, it's not like other sports. It isn't. If you get a 10-1 odds on a horse, that doesn't mean it's going to be 10-1 when the final.
Right.
If Derma Sotogake win, if you go bet it to win and it's 10-1 when you bet it, but it finishes 5-1, it's 5-1. There's no advantage to betting a horse race on Friday, unlike betting an NBA game per se or an NFL game early. There's absolutely no advantage whatsoever because the payout is whatever it is when they're done.
Yeah, when the horses break out of the gate. You're right. Yeah. So the one thing I would say, the Derby, because there's so much money bet on that race. I mean, I think it's an insane amount of money bet on this one race.
Ridiculous.
It's hard to move the line. You know what I mean? There's so much money in the pool. You or I could put 20 grand to win on Derma, and it's not going to move the needle at all, because that's one of the unique things too that's different from sports betting is it's pari-mutuel wagering. So you're betting against the rest of the public. All that money goes into a pool. The track takes, I think, 15% off the top, and then the rest of the money is distributed to the winners. So you're betting against other people. And I think that's one of the things that attracts, at least in my opinion, a lot of really sharp, like math type people and statistics people with backgrounds in math and probability, because you can really look at the odds and figure out what value is compared to maybe what's on the board. And that's what a lot of these computer assisted wagering, it's really a crisis right now, I think, for the horse racing industry, because there's these big computer outfits that put together, computer assisted wagering and figure out flaws in some of the lines. And then they go all in and basically just doing a numbers game, right? They're just, over time, they think they'll win if they keep betting these huge amounts at certain laws of probability. And the general Joe Blow bettor $2 wagerer like me or you, we're up against it, trying to bet against that kind of advantage, I think. So it's just unique. It's different than regular, I think, sports betting.
There's been a lot of bipartisan talk in politics this week and over the last month, per se, about AI, artificial intelligence, getting involved in all sorts of facets of our lives. And I think it's very compelling if anyone wants to go take a look, because I think that AI is already obviously had a part of sports betting, which could be an entire show probably. But I think that as we move along and these computers and bots get smarter, be careful, because it could change a lot of things going forward. And, other things could change forward. Hey, at least in the Kentucky Derby, you talk about $20,000 bets not moving the needle. You mean that's unlike someone sitting in the Great American Ballpark betting on LSU baseball while talking to the Alabama baseball coach. That's completely different story, right?
Yeah, well,
because $10,000 bet there it obviously throws up alarms. So, yeah,
that's what alerted the the regulators. I mean, college baseball doesn't draw that type of bet, so certainly raise a red flag. But you could certainly get away with it this week. But there's been a lot of just getting back to the Derby. There's been a lot of late scratches the last 24 hours. I've never seen anything quite like it. We've had about 3 or 4 horses that have scratched for different reasons. And so other horses on the also eligible list have now entered into the field. If you remember last year, that's how Rich Strike got into the field.
Correct.
And surprised everybody, won the race, because 24 hours ahead of time he wasn't even in the field. And then he got in and won with the number 21 saddlecloth. I mean, that doesn't happen very often.
Well, I promised we weren't going to go an hour, and we're about to hit the hour mark, so I do want to cut it off, and I appreciate your time. But I would like to have a show. I mean, I don't know what's going on at Churchill Downs right now, and you see, a trainer was suspended yesterday, and these horses that are dying. And I don't think obviously horses, tragic things happen to horses when they're running these races, and weird things happen. But to have the things that have happened at Churchill Downs the past week is a little strange. And, I would like to get your take on that at some point. I mean, can you give a 15-second take and explain what you think's going on?
Well, I mean, what happened with the trainer Savvy Joseph's 2 horses is called sudden death. And, that's different than a breakdown. These animals are 1,000-pound animals with their ankles are about as big as ours, but they're 1,000 pounds of weight on them. So when they have a catastrophic breakdown with their, a fractured leg, or often have to be euthanized because the animal just can't support that weight going forward. That's not what happened here. These horses basically just dropped dead.
Like their hearts just exploded or something?
Well, it's different from a human being. It's not necessarily a heart attack, but it's highly, highly unusual for it to happen to one horse. For it to happen to 2 horses from the same trainer in the same 24-hour period, that's where the red flag goes up. Is there's something going on, and that's all being investigated right now. And that's why the trainer's been suspended right now, because it's so unusual. There's got to be a reason for it. It can't be just sheer bad luck.
Well, that's something that I think going forward, and as we have 2 more major horse races, maybe at some point we'll be able to get into a little bit deeper, because I'm interested in it. I mean, you wonder what happens to these horses. It's just a strange coincidence, let's say, for that to happen the week leading up to the Kentucky Derby. It just reeks of sabotage to some extent. And I hope that's not what it is. I hope it's just a strange coincidence, but I want to know more. We
should be clear, though. I mean, it happened to horses that aren't in the Derby.
Aren't in the Derby.
Yeah, they were just at the track.
But Dunc, for this to exactly. But I don't care that it doesn't happen to Derby horses. The fact that this is happening all in one week, to me, just reeks of someone trying to shed some kind of bad light on horse racing. And what other better week if you were going to pull a sabotage, what other better week to do it than the week of the Kentucky Derby? It's weird that this is happening. I mean, if this happened any other week of the year, you'd still hear about it. I mean, at least we would. You would still hear about 4 horses dying in the same week at the same track. You would hear about that.
More than sabotage, that doesn't make sense to me. What would make more sense is if the trainer were, using some kind of illegal, performance enhancing drug that caused some kind of internal problem. That's what's more likely.
I hope that doesn't happen. I hope that didn't happen.
That's probably a more likely answer than something else. I mean, but the fact that it happens to the same trainer with 2 horses, then you start wondering, okay, what's going on? That's certainly one of the things that's happened with Bob Baffert. I mean, the reason he doesn't have any horses in the Derby is because Churchill Downs has banned him because he's had too many positive tests, for drug violations.
That's different, though, over the course of time with Bob Baffert. You're talking about something that's happened with one trainer. For him to have, you talk about how rare these deaths are, and the reason why I said it the way that I said it is, even if a trainer is doing something illegal, for him to have to pay that kind of price in the matter of a week is just completely super odd, no matter whether it's because of something he did or whatever. You know what I'm saying?
Well, put it this way, those horses are being, there's being autopsies done.
Yeah.
We'll probably find out what happened. So
was one of the horses supposed to run in the Oaks? I know they were both supposed to run in pre-races.
No, not the Oaks. No, they weren't that level horse. I mean, but I think it's more than likely that the suspicion would be that there's something going on with the veterinarian type of.
They're going to find out.
Yeah, I mean, they're definitely going to find out, and there'll be consequences. There's no doubt, because the people that run the Kentucky Derby and Churchill Downs officials certainly understand the microscope is on them right now. They got to get to the bottom of it.
Well, obviously, we've had people that have been following this show, and I like to watch the numbers as we go along, and they were interested. So we could probably end up having an entire show on this, because again, I'm someone who knows very superficial things about horse racing. I'm completely. I understand how it's bet. I understand, how. I understand the initial nuances, I guess, of horse racing, but I don't understand the intricate details of it at all. And I'm interested in it. So maybe it's a show that we can have one day, maybe before one of the other major races coming up. I'd like to talk about it. I think it's interesting. And a lot of
2 weeks away from the Preakness, and like about a month away from the Belmont.
The Belmont's my favorite because it's so long. And I know everybody talks about the Kentucky Derby, and it's cliche. I watch it every year. I love it. But to me, I think the Belmont's always the interesting, because it is the fewest horses and it's the longest race, and just race lengths that you talk about that these horses haven't run before. I mean, they haven't run the 1.5 miles at Belmont.
No, they never will again, most of them. So it's unique.
That's why I find it interesting. So
there's a lot of pageantry up in New York at Belmont. It's a neat day of racing, no doubt.
One of these days, I used to be jealous of Bob Fortas used to go every year and go cover the Belmont when we actually did those sorts of things. But anyway, Jeff Duncan, thank you so much for spending all this time on a Friday. I told you we wouldn't be on longer than 40 minutes. Well, I lied, but we started talking about things that were interesting, and as we usually do, we ran over our time, but it was enjoyable and informative all at the same time.
Yeah, look, tell everybody out there, if you get a chance, read this Jeff Ireland Q&A. I think you're going to get a lot, certainly more than what we talked about today. You're going to get it straight from, I hate to say this, the horse's mouth. Can I say that?
Yeah, you can today.
Anyway,
today
look for that this weekend.
Jeff Ireland. He has obviously done a wonderful, incredible job since he's come to New Orleans, and I'll be interested to see. And also, as Dunc was talking about, all the experts from around New Orleans, their picks for the Derby. You can check that out on NOLA.com as well. Every Friday here on the same social media stations, it's the Dattitude podcast. When I'm done here, I am going to go record my monologue, and I'm going to talk a little bit about a lot of different things. And our outro song today, it should be obvious if you're older than the age of, 50. I'll just say Dan Fogelberg. I mean, you got to know what our outro song is today. And if you can't figure it out, well, you can come listen to it. Wherever you find your podcast, it's Dattitude. Thanks to Jeff Duncan. I am Jim Derry. We'll see you next Friday. Peace and love, my friends.